Hi guys, DIY Mark here. I'm in the middle of a project for a client to build a couple of vanities, bathroom vanities, and each of the two vanities will have 3 drawers in them, and I thought I'd spend a couple minutes to show you how I typically build drawer boxes. There's a lot of different ways to build drawer boxes, everything from the high-end dovetails, which take a lot of time, down to just butted joints with staples or screws. I actually use Biscuits, and I get a pretty good result. Here is an example of one that I've built so far, and I'm going to show you how I built. I got a couple more to build, and I'll show you how I go about doing it. But you end up with a very strong box, and they're pretty easy to go together. So these are the side pieces and the front back of the drawer box. I've already gone ahead and edge band the edges, and I've ran a 1/4 inch dado that'll accept the bottom on all the pieces. Let me show you real quickly how it might assemble. So this is the front, here's the back, and left side, and it just goes on the outside, and the right side. So I think you get the general idea. Of course, then the bottom slides in. So the trick is to join this front and the back to the sides and come up with this fairly strong joint without having something that you can see on the side. And one of the reasons I don't like dovetails for this plywood, I use in this prefinished plywood, is that you can see the plywood. When we get all finished with this particular drawer, everything will be there will be no end grain that you can see. So the first thing to do is to lay this out like this, try to get a general idea how you have it set up, and then mark it for a biscuit. So I've completed one of the joints so I can show you. This is the side face, and this is the front face, and I've turned the whole drawer upside down, the drawer box upside down, so that the edge banded is towards the bench. And this joint here is actually already dryly secured, so in fact you can see that if I open it up here, it's just a simple slot with the biscuit here and a simple slot in the front, and the biscuit slides inside. And once you put a little bit of glue in here and the joint swells, the biscuit swells inside the slot, it's a very strong joint. And it's especially strong in the direction that the drawer is pulled. So as we put the drawer together, the drawer will be pulled this direction, which is exactly against the biscuit. So you end up with a very strong drawer box when you finish. And again, you don't have any outside fasteners or things that you can see. So it begins with a little bit of layout. The idea is that you can make a drawer of any size depth. In this particular case, this is a small, fairly shallow drawer, 3.5 inches wide, and it will fit one number 20 or number 10 biscuit. Excuse me, number 10. Is what you use for this 1/2 inch material. If I put it down here, it'll actually interfere with this slot when I try to put the bottom. And if I put it up too high, you can obviously will see the slot. So there's really only room for one spot right there. And what I typically do is, in order to get a little consistency, if I'm going to build usually more than one, in this case I'm building 6 drawers, I'll build a little jig. So that will give me help for a layout. So all I did was I marked up where this fit, and then I created a jig, and I marked where this measures from. So this references from the top of the drawer, and remember that the edge band is on the top. So if I lay it out right there, that little curve that I've cut into my little measuring jig tells me where I need to make my mark. So let me go back and show you one of the critical things about putting some of this together. So let's go back to our example joint here. So here's the side and the front. I'm going to put those two together. And you can see that these lines up completely flush. The front of the drawer box is lined up with the edge of the side. And in order to do that, you have to make sure that you index off the same face when you put the biscuit joiner fence. And that'll become a little more apparent as you see the next step when we begin to cut the slots. But it's important to mark the side pieces on the end grain and the front and the back pieces on the outside face. because that's where we're going to reference the fence of. So here's an example of a drawer box that I built for that same vanity, and this is the bottom drawer, and it's actually a much deeper drawer. In fact, it's 10.5 inches, and I don't know how well this comes through the camera, but I use the same exact technique to mark it. I put a jig. In this particular case, I'm using 3 biscuits at 3 different locations down there. And again, I just use the jig to lay it up, to mark the spots that I'm going to do it, and make sure, put my slots, and to make sure that that biscuit doesn't interfere with the bottom slot for the drawer bottom and doesn't pop out the top where you can see the biscuit. So to facilitate cutting the biscuits, I've built a little jig, and it's really not complicated. It just gives me a place to hold the side in an upright position, and this little clamp drops down in and allows me to facilitate. So I swung the camera around to the back side of the jig, and let me orient you a little bit. Here's our side piece that we're going to cut our slot in, and the side piece goes on the face of the jig, and it has a 90-degree fence that's perpendicular to this face here. So I slide that up, and you can see I move it up and down on the fence until the top of the side piece is flush with the top of the jig, which will assure the correct distance of the slot. And then as I bring in the biscuit joiner, I rest the fence on these fingers on the back, and I line up so that the middle index on the biscuit joiner lines up with the mark that I made earlier where I want to plunge. And then I'm able to hold it with one hand easily, so it gives me a lot of stability as I make the plunge cut. So let's give it a shot. And there you can see it. I've made a nice plunge cut there. It also allows me to do this very quickly with multiple pieces. So if you're building multiple drawers like we are today, I'm able to lay them all out ahead of time and then go into production mode and make a number of camera's back on the front side as I make the last side cut that I'm going to do. And I thought this would help for you to see it. I lock it down again. Again, the top is flush. Bring in the biscuit joiner. Get comfortable, get it where it's sitting nice and 90 to the cut piece. And make the cut. Pull it out, flip it over. And I'm ready for the next cut. So I've completed all the side cuts, and now it's time to cut the fronts and the backs. And the front and the back doesn't use the jig, it's much simpler. I just fasten them to the bench, and that's just so that it doesn't move around while I'm making the cut. You can see here that I've put both sides with 2 clamps, and that allows me to do 2 cuts in one operation, flip them around and do the other one. So let's go ahead and make the cut. And you can see my mark is here and here. I again take the biscuit joiner. Now what I'm doing is I'm lining up the fence with the face of the front and the back, which will assure that we get that correct depth. I'm aligning my mark of my biscuit joiner with the mark that I made on the front face of the drawer box. Plunge one, line up the other, plunge the next. So with all of our cuts made, let's do a quick dry fit to see how well they came out. So I'll place the biscuits in the side slots. It's usually the easiest. And all I'm checking for here is just to see how these come together. This looks good, and I like that That's a very nice flush on the front to the sides, which is exactly what I like to do. A dry fit of the bottom before I start my glue up. It's always a little tricky because this 1/4-inch bottom usually tacos a little bit or potato chips a little bit. It's not as totally straight, so you kind of have to do a little finessing. But that looks pretty good. So one more consideration before we start the glue up. And that is, when working with this pre-finished plywood, you've actually got a finished surface where the glue goes together. And I like to knock that finish off. And then after a couple, just rubbing it back and forth, just to knock off that finish. Just a few strokes and then you can see that I've knocked off that finish, and it's going to give me a better surface to bite to. So I'm going to start the glue up, and I'll just let the camera run as we do. And it looks pretty good. And then I'll just set it aside to dry. So I've begun the final stage of installing my drawer boxes here, and here is the one we just glued up. I've already got some already in the carcass here. This is again a vanity. I'm building 2 of these. They'll have 3 drawers each. This was the top drawer that you saw me put together with the biscuits, and it came out real nice. It's nice and square. Looks got a nice finish to it. And we're just going to use, for this application, I'm using side slides. You can certainly use undermount lump slides as well. It takes a couple more operations, but the biscuit construction works. So let's install this one, see how it goes. Line it up here. Nice tight fit. And now it's in and it slides great. So for the customer, really clean look. Hope that helps and hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching.